Good evening. So I'm an African, and I'm delighted to be here as an African to share my story. In Africa, we believe it takes a village to raise a child. And so naturally, my story begins in a village. This particular village is called Chihota. It's in Zimbabwe, the country where I was born and the country where much of my family still lives. My grandmother was born in this village, and she fled this village many, many years ago. At the time, Zimbabwe was colonized. And while Zimbabwe was colonized and all Black people within Zimbabwe were oppressed, her experience in this particular village was even more oppressive. Why did she need to flee? She was set to marry her older sister's husband. Why, you ask? To grow the sisterhood? Her older sister couldn't bear children. And as a family, they had a responsibility to honor what they had committed to her older sister's husband and his family. She looked at the situation and thought, not for me. I think there's more. Courage. Courage is the platform on which bold acts come forth, and bold acts are the momentum from which impact is created. My grandmother's courage led to the bold act of fleeing a village in colonized Zimbabwe. And she moved to this city, Harare, which is where I was born. But Harare was also in Zimbabwe, and remember, Zimbabwe was still colonized. So she fled a village, and her courage to flee was the courage to flee one oppression for a new oppression, which presumably was better. Because in Harare, in colonized Zimbabwe, it was segregated. So as a Black woman, not only could she not live in certain places and move freely in certain places, she couldn't do certain work. So she became a maid. I take you back. She fled a village to go to a big city to be a maid. Why? To give her children a better opportunity. And I wonder, what opportunities does a maid imagine she can create for her children? I guess her daughters can grow to be maids too. Maybe they can grow to be particularly talented maids. She definitely didn't pass on any of those genes to me because my housekeeping capabilities are atrocious at best. But her courage, her bold act, lands her in a city where she, on a maid's salary, made sure that her girls went to school. The British colonization in Zimbabwe was maybe a mildly kind of variety because Black Zimbabweans had the same education system that white Zimbabweans had under colonization. So my grandmother's daughters went to school. And the second of her daughters is my mother, Sharon. So Sharon is born to a courageous mother whose bold act has taken her out of a particular context and brought her into a place where at least she can get an education and hope for more. My mom remains quite sharp, quite ambitious, quite driven, excelled in school, gets a high school diploma, begins to work. By then it's 1979, a year before Zimbabwe becomes independent. So she's one of the first Black women to be a bank teller in the city, this shiny city you see, Harare, then called Salisbury, now Harare. But at the age of 18, which is when she started working, she becomes pregnant. And we know the story, don't we? A young woman doesn't have only has a high school education, doesn't have a university degree, and becomes pregnant. Well, what could go wrong? It was her turn to be courageous, and for her courage to prompt a bold act, and for her bold act to be impactful. She persevered. She had her children. That's myself, my brother, my sister, and my mom, Sharon. She had her children, and she stuck it out, eh? She had my brother when she was 18, she had me when she was 21, and she had my sister when she was 26. For context, I'm 41 and I haven't had my first one. might be running out of time. But essentially, she persevered and she saw to it that the three of us had an education. She was in an abusive marriage, which she left after 14 years. But she persevered and ensured that we had an education. My mother chose homes on the edges of areas where there were good schools to make sure we were okay. My younger sister's an actuary. I'm an accountant. My brother's an accountant, now a banker. And so I grew up to be an accountant because my mother was brave enough to persevere after being pregnant young. When I graduated with my honors degree, my mom graduated with her bachelor's degree. You're probably wondering what this whole story has to do with tech. Well, because my mother was brave enough to persevere and ensure that we had an education, 11 years into my accounting career, I got quite fidgety. I'm generally quite fidgety, but I got particularly fidgety 11 years into my career in accounting. A career that began in Zimbabwe. 5 years of that was spent with Deloitte in New York. Another year with Pricewaterhouse in Tanzania. But I felt like I want more. Cool people come up with great ideas, and then I come and I check, did you do it right? Did you account for it? And numbers are my friends, don't get me wrong, but enough beans had been counted on my watch that I felt like it was time for me to have a bold move. Consider my grandmother's courageous act of leaving a village to survive and move into a colonized city to be a maid. Consider my mother's courageous act of persevering from a young pregnancy, an abusive marriage, to make sure we had a good education. What was my big courageous act? Quitting accounting? That's the privilege of standing on the shoulders of giants. Is that for me, courage was quitting accounting at the age of 30 and deciding, while I could be knocking on the door of partner, I'd rather start again and switch to tech because I think I'm a little bored. This is my hope for many, that their reality today that oppresses and suppresses them can be transformed by the courage of a citizen to transform their reality to the point where generations later, courage is quitting accounting. Courage is being an educated, competent, reputed accountant who just decides, I want to try tech. And so I switched, and I was sitting with young graduates running circles around me. It was intimidating. I was looking at friends of mine getting promoted. They were partners. They were buying bigger homes, bigger cars. And I, couldn't tell a database from a user interface at this point. But that journey was interesting for me because I was seeking intellectual stimulation where my grandmother and my mother sought physical safety. They built a platform on which I could rise. And so a few years into my career in tech, being tired of being the only Black woman in the room, the only woman in the room, I decided there's something wrong with this picture. Accounting, generations before me, had figured this one out. Women CFOs, fairly common. 20% of people that work in tech today are women. 17% of CTOs in the world are women. 1% of VC funding in tech startups goes to women. 1%. If I ask you of the unicorns and their founders, Zuckerberg, Apple, these are men. And so when we talk about stories, the story of tech is a different one, is it not? When my mom was raising us to be hopefully responsible individuals, not frivolous people that quit accounting to become techies at the age of 30. Saturday mornings, at the end of the month, we would have a list of all the bills that needed to be paid. She'd bring out her checkbook and make us write out the checks to all the places where bills needed to be paid. We would then go into the city and go from shop to shop with the statement and the check and hand it over to make the payment. I don't even know the last time I saw, much less wrote a check. When you think of how much tech you've used today, from how you woke up, how you scheduled your day, how you consume entertainment, how you stay connected, how you manage your health, tech, 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 tech. And yet 1% of VC funding goes to women. 17% of the leaders in technology are women. My belief is that necessity is the mother of invention. My grandmother's need for freedom and self-expression drove her to invent a path out. My mother's need to pick the baton from her mother and ensure that her children had a better outcome led her to persevere through her struggle. My desire for a cooler career led me to leave accounting and move into technology. Innovation sits in the hands of people who are aspirant and have a skill and a capability. If we do not shift the balance of who can create technology, we are heading off of a really, really, really scary cliff. I like white guys. Some of my best friends are white guys. Guarantee you. There just aren't enough cool white guys in Silicon Valley to figure out the problems in the village that my grandmother fled, because they've never been there. Guess who's there? Women like my grandmother. So my transition from accounting to tech, though it began as a maybe selfish, frivolous venture, has become an aspiration to raise up the next generation of African software developers. We Think Code, the organization that I lead, recruits young people into tech, but the young people we recruit are young people that ordinarily wouldn't find themselves there. Are young people who grow up in homes where there are no computers, in homes where if we took a computer, there's no electricity. If we took a computer and electricity, there is no money to pay for data. If we took a computer and electricity and paid for data, there is no company with which to commune around creating innovative technological ideas. These are the homes to which we grow and recruit talented people. Why? Because the village from which I was raised has shown me that in these homes, the intellect, the passion, the commitment to create innovative solutions with technology is there. And that is where we recruit. 52% of our intake over the last 3 years is women. 90% of our intake come from low-income households, households on the breadline. 90% of people that come out of our academy are employed in software development jobs within 4 months of graduating. Our goal? Nothing hectic, just world domination. Our goal is to shift Africa from a net consumer of technology to being a net creator of technology. Why? Because that is what is going to shape tomorrow. That is where the jobs of tomorrow are. That is the literacy and the competence that will change this world and drive inclusion. And that is my goal. That is my dream. What I implore you to do, the next time you pick up a device and you feel like you're not sure what to do with it, and you're like, oh, I'm not technical, take a deep breath, pick that device up again, and insist that you are. Demand of those that create that technology that they understand what you need to be able to engage with it. Because the reason you are confused is because you're not represented among those that created it to begin with. And that is our mission, that you be represented, that I be represented, and that we use this powerful technology to move into a future that is inclusive, that is equitable, and that is sustainable. This is the graduating class of 2023, the Johannesburg campus of We Think Code. 200 graduates this year. It's now my life's work. And my goal is that over the next 10 years, we go from 200 to thousands a year, because world domination is within reach. The best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The next best time to plant a tree is now. Thank you.